What's up everyone, JayzTwoCents here, and I'm bringing you a talking head video to give you sort of a breaking news, like a doot. There's some big news that has hit this week. We're gonna talk about that. So feel free to minimize this video and just listen if you're busy and doing other things. There's no point in looking at me. I'm not doing any editing. I'm not even putting any music in this. Intel's got some problems right now because of a kernel leak happening on a hardware level in their x86 CPUs, x86 and 64 CPUs. So yeah. You're gonna wanna listen to this one. I'm not gonna dive too deep down the rabbit hole of what the problem is, trying to talk technical jargon and stuff about things that I truly, honestly, I'm not a CPU architect. I don't know how it works. I don't care how it works, because between you and me, what the problem is actually doing is less important to me than what the fix is, what's the effect of the fix gonna be, and what is at stake right now. And that's what most people should be concerned with. But what's happening here is we've actually got three different problems. Three, not just one. Meltdown is the one that's kind of hitting the mainstream media hard because it affects Intel x86 64 processors, which, as you guys know, Intel still has the huge majority market share, which means they kind of shoulder the burden of most of this problem and the way it's affecting people. But there's three problems out there. Between all three of them, all manufacturers of CPUs and microprocessors are affected. Intel, AMD, and ARM even. The problem is Intel's more affected by this on their hardware level bug because AMD and ARM are affected more on a software level, and the kernel bug that we're about to talk about with Intel, you have to have physical access to the machine on AMD CPUs to have the exploit available to you, whereas Intel's memory leak and the way that the memory leak with the kernel is happening versus AMD. If you have an AMD processor, you're pretty much unaffected by this, even though the problem does actually still sort of exist for you as well. Now the kernel, and I don't mean Kentucky Fried Chicken kernel, although it does sound pretty good right about now, the kernel is kind of sitting in between the processor and the OS. It's a very basic way of describing it, basically. But it holds very sensitive data, and there's encryption levels and things that happen, but unfortunately the memory leak that's happening right now with the kernel is very accessible, and it's not encrypted, which means things like passwords and sensitive data, access point to your computer and from your computer. It's basically a backdoor that anyone can get into that machine and do anything they want. They can delete data, they can add data, they can run programs, run malicious software. If you thought the ransomware was a bad thing, that only affected certain people with certain patches that weren't in place. This affects everybody, pretty much everybody. So if you're on Windows, of course, Linux, and even Mac OS, you are affected by this. Unfortunately, this is one of those times where you can't be like, well, I'm on Mac, I'm impervious to these types of things. No, you're affected by this as well because you're running Intel CPUs. But Intel did in fact come forth and say, yes, this is a problem and we're working to fix this. It's really up to the software vendors to patch this, because this is happening now on an OS level. And to understand more about this problem, you have to understand how they even arise. Is a lot of companies and even independent researchers, without even being asked, will go and hack websites. They'll hack software, they'll hack hardware. And then what they do is they present the data. These are good hackers. Sounds weird, right? These are good hackers who will present the data to the firms so that they can be fixed and patched and stuff, usually for a nominal fee. I mean, they make a lot of money doing this security stuff. And then there are firms that are hired to continually try to hack and break in, backdoor, whatever. And we used that when I worked in software. We had a firm that was constantly, their whole job was to just constantly test our stuff, find the exploits, and let us fix them. So that is exactly what happened here, is a firm found this exploit, which they tested as far back as 10-year-old processors and found that this exploit was present. So this is not new. This has been going on for over a decade. Now, when it comes to the problem, it's actually started to be fixed by some of the software vendors as recently as December. In fact, the beginning of December, a Mac OS update went out that had a fix in it for that. So as you can see, by the time we hear about it, it's been long going on. And the reason for that is because you don't want to tip off the hackers, because you want to try and fix this before it makes mainstream. That way the hackers will have an opportunity to exploit this. So that's why a lot of this is kept hush-hush, not because they're trying to, oh my God, protect market share and shareholders' interest, of course. We're gonna talk about Intel and Microsoft here because that's the majority, right? All the distros and stuff on Linux and the way the Linux kernel's handled, that's already been worked on as well, and it's being worked on and patches are rolling out for that. But of course, we are at the mercy of Microsoft and what they do with this. And they're gonna be kind of rewriting and putting out I believe the update is supposed to be January 9th on this new update. And in fact, the update That way you guys can check and see if you have it, because unfortunately now to truly fix this, you're gonna have to have updates turned on. But it's gonna be update KB4054022. That is the update that is supposed to fix this. But here's the problem. Because of the way the kernel is being accessed and kind of rewritten with the OS to try and band-aid this is a band-aid fix. There's no other way to put it. This is a band-aid fix because there is a hardware level problem here. So until Intel fix this on new CPUs, our old CPUs are still going to be using software band-aid fixes, which unfortunately can probably be broken and hacked as well. So you know people are going to be attacking the fix. The fix is where you find the code for the problem. And that's what they're going to attack, unfortunately. So just wait for that. The fix could slow down your Intel CPU by as little as 5% or as much as 30%, depending on your age of your processor and the workload on it. Now, processors with PCIe are going to be a little bit less infected, and those are processors that are Haswell 4th gen and newer. The higher end the CPU and the stronger it is, probably the less impacted it will be performance-wise, but it will have an impact no matter what. These slower, more baseline entry-level CPUs are probably going to see a much higher hit. And then of course, those without PCIe or older than Haswell 4th gen are going to see probably a significant hit, because PCIe is supposed to be what's kind of mitigating a lot of this performance loss. So the question is, how much is it going to affect you and impact you? I have no idea. We don't know until the patch rolls out worldwide and it gets out to its users. And I'm sure you're going to see people saying it's probably gone as higher than 30%. You might see people saying, I don't even notice a difference. Intel is pretty convinced that average everyday consumers, like on home PCs, are not going to notice really much of a difference at all. It's those that are running data centers and cloud farms and data farms and all that sort of stuff that are going to notice more of an impact, because those CPUs are being leveraged to their max capacity anyway. So once you're already at max capacity at your current workload and your current capability and it slows down, that's where you're gonna notice it, right? Because it comes off the top. If you're not using all of that performance headroom and it comes down up here, but you're still here, you're not gonna notice it that much. But 5 to 30% slowdown, imagine overnight with an update comes through and your CPU is 30% slower because of a hardware level bug that's existed for over a decade on Intel CPUs. This is not the way we needed to start 2018. All we can do is wait, and there is nothing we can do other than turn on updates now on Microsoft. We have no choice, unless you want to leave yourself exposed. I mean, if you want to be a CPU flasher, leave yourself exposed. That's on you. I mean, it really is, but I mean, the only way you can really fix this now is hope that the CPU manufacturers and the OS vendors are talking to try and fix this as best they can. But I don't think this is going anywhere. I think now that this has hit mainstream and the hackers now know where to look, and when the patch rolls out, the patch is gonna obviously point hackers in the right direction on where to kind of zero in on where the problem is and start to reverse engineer that patch to try and access things. I'm telling you right now, man, hackers, it's incredibly, it's impressive how smart they are, but man, does it suck when it's used for malicious purposes.